Now, the world is an uncertain and dangerous place, and I cannot stay alive without the help of other people. Even if I wanted to be entirely self-sufficient, by growing my own food, making my own clothes, building my own house, and so on, these are skills that I would need to learn from someone else. You might argue that, at some time, someone, somewhere, had to learn this knowledge and these skills for themselves, or they would never have been learnt. But, in practice, humankind, and the skills human beings need to survive, have evolved gradually over time. On occasion, individuals will learn something, or develop a new skill, entirely on their own. But, to do so, they rely on pre-existing knowledge and skills. For example, whoever it was who first discovered how to light a fire, would not have survived for long enough to do so, unless they had food to eat. So that person either relied on others for food, or had learnt from others the knowledge and skills required to obtain food for themselves. As a minimum then, I rely on other people to teach me about the world, and the skills I need to survive. And because, in practice, I do not produce all my own food, make all my own clothes, build my own house, and generate the power required by all the appliances that I use to support my daily life, I also need other people to provide me with these things. And, when things go wrong, I need other people to help me. Without other people, I am dead. So, it is worth thinking about how I interact with other people. The first thing I notice is that although I need other people to help me, they do not always do so. Indeed, I often find that other people behave in ways that hinder rather than help me. Sometimes, people actively set out to hinder me. They may try to hurt me, maybe because they dislike me for some reason, or maybe because they like hurting people. Or they may deliberately hinder me, to get something they want, for example they may rob me. And people may hinder me unintentionally. In many cases resources are finite, and your gain will be my loss. If you and I both apply for the same job, and you get it, then I have not. If there is one apple left in the fruit bowl, and you eat it, then I cannot. And even if people aren't hindering me, that doesn't mean they are actively helping me. And why should they? People will only act in ways that help me, if that is the course of action that they prefer. And that will only be the case if there are good reasons for them to want to act in that way. One reason people might act in ways that help me, is that society requires them to. There are laws that are intended to prevent other people from harming me, and a benefit system that will provide support for me, if I fall on hard times. As a child, I was educated by the state, and learnt the things that I need to survive in the society I live in. I will consider the role of the state later. For now, it is enough to acknowledge that the state does provide useful support to me in many areas. But it is not sufficient. If I want more than the benefits provided by the state, and do not want to steal, I will need to earn money. That requires the help of others. As a minimum I will need people to give me the work in the first place, and to pay me for doing it. I will be much better placed to deal with times of personal distress, if I know people who will lend me practical and emotional support. On a more mundane level, day-to-day life is so much easier, if there are others around me who will lend me a helping hand. And I enjoy the company of others, and so I want to know people who will spend time with me, and do things with me. One way I can get people to help me is by threatening them. Suppose I am much bigger than you, and I want some ready money. I then inform you that, unless you hand me the contents of your wallet, I will punch you in the nose. You may well decide that, given the options available to you, you prefer parting with your cash to having your facial features rearranged. Now, threatening people can be a very effective way of getting what I want. However, it has some disadvantages. It may not be legal, which may have adverse consequences for me. Even if my threats are within the law, experience shows that people will generally resent being treated in this way. If I threaten you, you may therefore actively look for opportunities to hurt me in future, and, in the absence of further threats, are likely to be most unwilling to help me in any way. And it is not just you who may turn against me. Other people will observe that I am happy to threaten you to get what I want. Particularly if you have done me no harm, those other people may reasonably conclude that what I am doing to you today, I may well do to them tomorrow. To avoid this happening, they may start to avoid me. That makes it more difficult for me to ask them for assistance in future. Now, if I consider that you are already my enemy, maybe because you have previously acted in ways that hurt me, or have led me to believe that you will do so, then I might not care if you resent my actions. I may also feel that others will understand why I am treating you in this way. If you are a stranger to me, and I never expect to meet you again, then I may consider that the risk of you hurting me in future is minimal. If you are a stranger to me, you may be a stranger to those around me, and so those others may not care how I treat you, and consider that their relationship with me differs from yours. In these cases, I may consider that threatening you, to get what I want, is my preferred way forward. However, in most cases, acting in ways that turn people against me is not desirable. It reduces the number of people who may be willing to help me in future, and therefore reduces the future options available to me at times when I may really need assistance. And so, I will generally avoid threatening people to get what I want. Another reason people might help me is if I offer them something in exchange. For example, I might offer to help you decorate your spare room, if you help me to clear out my backyard. This is the basis of all commercial transactions. People will provide me with goods and services that I want, if I pay them to do so. This is a very common and powerful way of getting what I want. Neither party is being threatened, and both consider the transaction to be beneficial to them. After all, if you considered that the transaction was detrimental to you, why would you agree to the exchange? So how can I encourage people to transact with me in this way? Well, as my side of the bargain, I have to offer something that the other party values sufficiently, that they will agree to the trade. When I am paying in cash for a service, this is simply a question of establishing, and paying, the required price. But where I am trading one thing or service for another, I will have to find out what the other party wants and values. As people are all different, this will require me to communicate with the other party, to understand their particular circumstances, listen carefully to what they are saying, and tailor my proposal accordingly. If I act dishonestly when transacting with you, that will not encourage you and other people to transact with me in future. For example, if you agree to help clear my backyard, because I have led you to believe that this simply involves throwing away a few broken flower pots, you will not be happy if you turn up, and are faced with something resembling the municipal tip. Again, if I default on my half of the bargain, and refuse to help you decorate your spare room, after you have helped clear my backyard, you will not be impressed. In such cases you will be reluctant to transact with me again. You may tell others about my behavior, who will be deterred from transacting with me in their turn. A limitation of transactions of this sort is their specific and limited scope. Once both parties have done what they have promised, then there is no further obligation on either side. At times when I really need help, I may be short of financial or other resources, and not in a position to offer anything in return. Luckily, in some cases, people will help me without being explicitly incentivized to do so. You might help me clear out my backyard because you enjoy my company. Or you may consider that, if you help me now, then I may be more inclined to help you in future, should you need it. Or both of these. If you are very fond of me, you may even help me just because you want to help me. I can therefore increase the likelihood that you will help me when I most need it, without my having to pay you, by being good company to you, and helping you when you need it, without attaching any conditions to that help. To do this, I will have to get to understand your likes and dislikes, and refrain from acting in ways that offend you. I will have to be alert to your needs, to identify opportunities where my assistance will be appreciated. I will therefore need to spend time in your company or otherwise communicating extensively with you. In other words, I will befriend you. Now, making friends is time-intensive. If I am to continue investing that time in you, I may want to see some return on my investment. If I am routinely offering you assistance, but nothing is coming the other way, I may well decide to invest my time elsewhere. This may all sound very calculating. Surely, I might be friends with you just because I enjoy your company, without expecting anything in return. And yes, of course I can enjoy your company, and spend time with you, without being disappointed that I am getting nothing beyond that. But, if I am going to invest time in going out of my way to be helpful to others, then I may prefer to focus those efforts on the people who are going out of their way to be helpful to me, rather than those who are not. So, what conclusions can I draw from all this, regarding how I want to behave towards others, in order that they will want to transact with me and befriend me? Well, although there may be some exceptions, I do not generally want to threaten or bully people to get what I want, or act in ways that needlessly alienate them. I want to be honest in my transactions with other people. I want to help other people, but my time is limited, so I will tend to focus those efforts on people who I think may offer me help in return, when I need it. I said that I want to be honest in my transactions with other people. But is that always right? After all, people do regularly tell lies and break promises. Are there any circumstances where this is a reasonable thing to do? I have also said that I do not want to needlessly alienate people. Is it reasonable to tell lies to avoid hurting someone's feelings? And what is truth anyway? I have said that the world is a radically uncertain and subjective place. People are all different, have all had different experiences and all have different beliefs, so things that I regard as true, others may regard as false. This last point means that it is quite possible, even likely, that on occasion you will tell me things that you consider to be true, but that I consider to be false. But, if I am asking you for information, that is because I want to know what you think. Not what you think I think, or what you think I want to hear. So, yes, truth is subjective. But, in the context of your acting honestly, of telling me the truth, truth is what you believe to be the case, and if you tell me something that you do not believe to be the case, then you are lying to me. So, you may tell me one thing, and your friend may tell me something different, and you may both be telling the truth, you just believe different things. But if you tell me one thing, and then tell your friend something different, then, assuming that you haven't changed your mind in the interval between speaking to us, you are lying to at least one of us. And if you tell me the truth, but nonetheless tell me something that I do not consider to be true, well, such differences in opinion can be illuminating. Trying to understand why we believe different things can help me to better understand the world, and may lead me to change my beliefs. On the other hand, it may highlight areas where we both believe our views to be well-founded, and cannot find any common ground. The outcome may be that, next time I want to know something in that area, I ask someone else. If you routinely say things that are diametrically opposed to my experience and beliefs, and especially if they conflict with my immediate perceptions, then it is likely that I will conclude that you are a fool, or that you are lying to me after all. Now, if I only have limited time to invest in building close mutually supportive friendships, I am unlikely to invest that time in people who I consider to be fools or liars, for the simple reason that, if I ask a fool for help, they are likely to mess it up, and, if I ask a liar for help, they may send me on a wild goose chase, or promise me help and then not deliver it. And this will work the other way. If you think I am a fool or a liar, you will not want to invest time in helping me. Now, if I am truthful with you, and your beliefs are consistently different to mine, you may conclude that I am a fool. But, in that case, I will probably think the same about you. If we are honest with each other, we may well reach that mutual conclusion more rapidly, which will save us both precious time. On the other hand, if you are not a fool, and you catch me lying to you, I may well have alienated someone who could have been a valuable friend. So, from my perspective, whether or not you are a fool, it is better to be honest with you. But what if telling the truth will hurt your feelings? Lying in these circumstances may seem like a kind thing to do. However, if you find out that I have been lying to you, even if the lie was told with the best of intentions, that is still going to undermine your trust in what I tell you in future. To maintain trust, it is better to be truthful. Note that this does not mean that I have to be cruel. It is usually possible to be tactful and diplomatic, even when conveying unpleasant truths. Or, rather than saying something that I know will hurt you, I can often say nothing at all. But what about people who break promises or lie to me, or otherwise try to hurt me? Surely, they are my enemies, and it makes sense for me to act dishonestly with them. After all, if someone is going to harm me anyway, and by lying or breaking a promise I can harm them, maybe so they are not so able to harm me in future, then this will be attractive to me. There are many cases of people doing this. For example, spies pretend to be on one side, while passing information to the other. You may regard being a spy as a desirable and glamorous thing. This glorification of lying goes back to the very earliest literature. Odysseus, the hero of the Odyssey, lies and cheats his way around the Mediterranean. But suppose I am a spy, or otherwise act deceitfully. If you know that I am capable of deceiving others, even if those others are your enemies, how can you be sure that I am not deceiving you? Even if you have asked me to spy for you, it will be difficult for you to trust someone who you know to be a spy. After all, while his contemporaries may have admired Odysseus for his quick wits, none of them ever trusted him. Indeed, traditionally actors were regarded as untrustworthy for precisely this reason, that their profession involved presenting themselves as someone that they were not, and people considered that, if they could lie convincingly on stage, then they could lie when they were off stage. On this basis, the better the actor, the less you should trust them. So, we should hold superstar actors in contempt, rather than hanging on their every word. This logic seems reasonable to me. Another case where I might be tempted to lie, is if I stand to benefit by lying or breaking a promise. If the benefit is large enough, then I might consider that making an enemy is worth it. But, if you see that I am prepared to lie and break promises if the reward is large enough, then you will conclude that, if the price is right, I will lie and break promises to you. And so you will not trust me. So, in all these cases, the price I pay for lying to anyone, is that I lose the trust of everyone. And, in an uncertain world, where I need to rely on others, that seems like a pretty high price. What if other people don't find out about the lie or broken promise? Is it worth lying then? Well, lies have a habit of coming to light, for example because the person who has been lied to, tells other people about it. So, the risk being taken is high. As a wise man put it, not even for a joke will I tell a lie. This may sound somewhat extreme. But each little lie erodes trust. If I have repeatedly sent you off on a wild goose chase, and then laughed at my successful practical joke, you are going to be very suspicious if I ask you to do anything for me in future, and may well just refuse. If, on any occasion, I really do need your help to get out of a hole, then I might well find your cynicism and reluctance to assist me rather inconvenient. Altogether, it does seem that, unless I want to be friendless and held in general contempt, lying is best avoided. Given that I want to avoid lying, I will want to be careful not to accidentally appear to tell lies. Two ways in which this might happen are, if you misunderstand what I am saying, or, if circumstances change. To reduce the risk of being misunderstood, I can be precise in what I say, and use clear language that you will understand. This is a reason for using grammatically correct English, and avoiding slang and jargon. Now, sometimes, people purposefully do not use clear language. Euphemism is when a mild or indirect expression is used in place of one that is considered too embarrassing or distressing. In some circumstances, using euphemism can be tactful and considerate, and save embarrassment on both sides, with no loss of understanding. An example might be if I am discussing bodily functions with my maiden aunt. However, by its very nature, euphemism introduces some ambiguity, and, if I want to be clear in what I am saying, it will often be better to directly say what I mean. In passing, I note that increasingly euphemism is being used by public figures in communications, solely with the intention of trying to disguise what it is that they are saying. So, making 1,000 people redundant gets described as right-sizing, fraud gets described as technical accounting irregularities, and politicians never string two straight words together. In this guise, the purpose of euphemism is entirely to mislead. The hope is that people won't understand what is being said, so that the difficult questions won't have to be answered. This is basically lying. If a public figure isn't prepared to say what they mean in plain English, why should I trust them? There is of course a flip side to this. If I want public figures to be straight with me, I have to give them time to explain the context of what has happened, and the reasoning for the decisions that have been made. Interviewers who simply shout, repeatedly demanding a yes or no answer to a complex question, are therefore not helping the situation. Another area where misunderstanding can arise is if I am telling you things that I am not certain of, but you regard my speculative musings as concrete statements of fact. To avoid this, I can be clear about the status of the information I am passing on. For example, is it based on personal experience, hearsay, or am I just guessing? How current is my information, and how reliable do I consider it to be? This can all help you decide how much weight to put on what I am saying. However, even if I attach appropriate disclaimers to what I say, if the information I am passing on consistently proves to be incorrect, then that will undermine the trust you put in what I say in future. So, in many cases, it will be sensible to avoid speculation, and only communicate what I am at least reasonably certain of. From time to time, changing circumstances may make a liar out of me. For example, I tell you that the train you want is at 8:20 a.m., and then find out that the timetable has changed. Now, I didn't mean to mislead you. But, from your perspective, this is what has happened. So how can I manage the implications of this? Well, I can contact you to let you know the train times have changed, and apologize for getting it wrong. Even if it is too late, and you have already found this out for yourself, because you missed the train, my contacting you will help demonstrate that I am trying to help you, rather than trying to hinder you. The risk of changing circumstances making a liar out of me is particularly acute when I make commitments to other people. If I promise to do something, and you have made plans on that basis, and then I break my commitment to you, you are likely to be upset. Breaking commitments to others is a very effective way to lose their trust. And keeping promises is difficult. I can never be absolutely certain that I will be able to keep a promise. It is relatively easy for me not to lie, I just have to say what I believe to be true at the time I say it. But whenever I promise to do something in the future, there is always the possibility that events may conspire in the interim, so that I am unable to keep my word. Now, one way I can avoid breaking any promises is to not make any commitments to anyone, ever. But in practice this would be very difficult. For example, I make a commitment when I take a job, accept a dinner invitation, or promise my cohabitee that I will put the bins out on Wednesday. And they are necessary commitments. I need a job to pay off the mortgage, or I will be homeless. If I refuse every invitation to dinner, or look shifty and say I might come, or I might not, then the supply of dinner invitations will dry up, and I will be faced with an endless series of dreary nights in. If I don't promise to take the bins out, my cohabitee will lose patience, and find someone else to cohabit with. And, even if I live the lonely life of a hermit, and avoid all social contact, other people will expect me to obey the law. And, crucially, if I want to build mutually supportive friendships with other people, then I am going to have to interact with them, and this will involve making commitments to them, particularly if I want to be helpful and useful to them. Indeed, the concept of friendship includes an implicit commitment to be loyal, to stand by your friends when they need you. Ultimately, that is what friends are for. So, making commitments is necessary, but creates the risk that by breaking those commitments I lose the trust of others. Can I manage that risk? Yes, I can. I can think carefully before making a commitment. If it is not necessary to make a promise, then I won't make one. If I do make a promise, then I can be precise in what I am promising, and limit my explicit commitments to what is necessary, and to what I am confident that I can deliver. This may all sound rather cold and calculating. But my reputation for keeping my word is important to me, and I can always do more than I have promised. Under-promising and over-delivering builds trust, and is generally more appreciated than over-promising and under-delivering. There are of course some limitations here. If I tell my mother that I will pop round and mow the lawn at the weekend, I am not immediately going to list every possible thing that I can think of that might prevent me from doing that. Compare this with the situation where my mother is signing a contract with someone to come and mow her lawn. In that case, she would probably expect that contract to have pages and pages of caveats and conditions. But, one of the key reasons for asking someone to sign a legal contract can be a lack of trust that they will follow the spirit of what has been agreed. And the relationship I have with my mother, and would hope to have with my friends, is based on mutual trust, not legal obligation. Treating my promise to mow the lawn like a legal contract indicates that I do not think that mutual trust exists, which will in turn undermine my mother's trust in me. And that is the opposite of what I want. Further, while limiting the scope of my promises, and adding caveats, can help manage expectations, in practice people will only hear what they want to hear. Suppose I have promised to take you out for dinner, unless I have to work late, and then I don't take you out for dinner, because I have to work late. You may still feel that I have broken a promise. Regular communication may help. If I remind you the day before, that our dinner is contingent on me not having to work late, and let you know as soon as I can, that I am in fact going to have to work late, and unfortunately therefore, I am not going to be able to take you out for dinner, that may help me maintain your trust. On the downside, it may not be enough to save our relationship. I clearly love my job more than I love you. You may therefore prefer to trust me as your ex-boyfriend. This also highlights another area of risk. It is very easy to get into a position where I have conflicting commitments. In this case, the commitment that I have made to my employer conflicts with the commitment I have made to take you out for dinner. If I make two commitments that conflict with each other, then I will have to break at least one of them. The best way to avoid this is to think carefully before committing to anything, and refuse to commit to something if I am already committed to something else that conflicts with it. An alternative approach is to try and manage this by caveating the second commitment, as I tried to do with my promise to take you out for dinner. Yet another option is to try and get out of the first commitment, so I can accept the second. But if I am going to do this without lying, I am going to have to tell whoever the first commitment was made to, that this is what I am doing. Unless I have a very good reason for doing so, telling someone that I am going to let them down, because I have better things to do, is likely to destroy their trust in my reliability. If I do have to break a commitment to you, then I can try to minimize the damage by letting you know as soon as possible, so that you have a chance to make alternative arrangements. I can also try to find an alternative way forward. So, if I am ultimately unable to mow my mother's lawn at the weekend, as I have promised, maybe I can call my sister and ask her if she can drop round and do some mowing in my place. Or, maybe I can offer to come round on Monday and do the mowing then. It is also important to remember that to maintain trust, I need to keep my commitments in full. If I agree to meet you at a specified time, then keeping my word includes being there at the time we agreed. If I am late, then I have broken my word. Now, based on common practice, I may think that if I message you and let you know that I am going to be late, that will make everything fine. Well, it may help, particularly if I am usually on time and have a good reason for being late on this particular occasion. At least, if I let you know that I am going to be late and give you an idea of when I might arrive, you may hang around and wait for me, assuming that you have nothing better to do. But I am still breaking my word and demonstrating to you that I am unreliable. So, I will try hard not to be late in the first place. The longer term a commitment is, the more difficult it is to be confident that I will be able to meet it. If I say I'm going to go and make you a cup of tea now, I can have a pretty high degree of confidence that I will do so. But, if I promise that I will take you to the FA Cup final in 2 years' time, then all sorts of things could prevent me from doing that. So, I want to be particularly wary of making longer term commitments. Finally, it is important to realize that many of the commitments I have are not commitments that I have ever explicitly made, but commitments that have arisen because my past behavior leads other people to rely on me acting in certain ways. So, suppose that you are a colleague of mine, and that on every weekday for the last 3 years I have given you a lift home from work. If tomorrow, without warning, I go home without giving you a lift, you will feel aggrieved. Even if I have never promised to give you a lift every day, my past behavior is such that I have effectively committed to do so, and, even in the absence of an explicit promise to that effect, it is reasonable for you to rely on me to give you a lift. Breaking an implicit commitment such as this will therefore still be regarded as a breach of trust. To avoid this, it is important that I think about what expectations you may have of me. If I think those expectations may be unreasonable or unrealistic, then it will be important for me to manage them, usually by having a conversation with you, to make sure you understand the extent to which you can rely on me. The conclusion of all this is that as a general principle, I want to tell the truth, understood as only saying things that I believe to be the case, and that when I have commitments to other people, then I want to keep them. In order to achieve this, I want to be careful both about what I say, and about the explicit or implicit commitments that I make. I have noted that keeping long-term commitments is particularly difficult. One long-term commitment that a lot of people make is getting married. So, would I ever want to get married? Originally, marriage was a religious ceremony. Nowadays, the religious aspect is often less to the fore, or non-existent. However, marriage still persists as a mechanism by which couples can avow their commitment to each other, in a way that has legal recognition and force. Some might argue that if you take the religion out of marriage you no longer have a marriage, and in this case we should use another term, e.g. a civil partnership. However, marriage is the term that is most often used, and I will use it here. The Anglican marriage service, in the Book of Common Prayer, explains the purpose of marriage as follows. First, it was ordained for the procreation of children, to be brought up in the fear and nurture of the Lord, and to the praise of his holy name. Secondly, it was ordained for a remedy against sin, and to avoid fornication, that such persons as have not the gift of continency might marry, and keep themselves undefiled members of Christ's body. Thirdly, it was ordained for the mutual society, help, and comfort, that the one ought to have of the other, both in prosperity and adversity. Putting aside the religious aspects, marriage was therefore envisaged as providing a stable, monogamous relationship between two people, for the purpose of producing and bringing up children, and providing mutual support. The modern secular concept of marriage is very similar, although one difference is that when looking at same-sex relationships, the procreation of children will not be involved. Some people get quite worked up about this, and say that for this reason a same-sex couple should not be allowed to get married. But the procreation of children was only one of the purposes of a marriage. For various reasons, a heterosexual couple may be unable to have children, yet it is generally accepted that such a couple can get married. So, this argument is spurious. Now, given the nature of the commitment that is being made, getting married involves making promises that are difficult to keep. To love, support, and be faithful to another human being, so long as ye both shall live, is a task that should not be underestimated. This is evidenced by the divorce rate. And getting married is a very public commitment. Most people exchange their marriage vows in front of their family and friends. Even when the marriage ceremony is private, it is a matter of public record. So, if a person is unable to keep their marriage vows for whatever reason, and their marriage ends in divorce, the fact that a solemn promise has been broken will be obvious to a large number of people. I want to be respected as someone who keeps their word. Getting married therefore seems like a pretty risky thing to do. Statistics indicate that I am quite likely to break my wedding vows, and, if I do break them, it will be obvious to a lot of people. Furthermore, in this day and age, there is no need to get married in order to cohabit or have children with another person. Modern society attaches no stigma to living in sin, or to children who are illegitimate. Notwithstanding these points, people do continue to get married. Does this mean that they haven't thought things through, or don't care about breaking their word, and think that getting divorced is no big deal? Now, historically, getting divorced was a very big deal. When marriage was still a religious ceremony, it was extremely difficult to get divorced. The church's view was that by getting married, you had made a promise to God, and that is not the sort of promise that you can unmake. Indeed, the Anglican Church only exists because the Roman Catholic Church wouldn't annul the marriage between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. These days getting divorced is much more straightforward, and there is much less stigma attached to divorce than previously. But there is still some stigma. If your best friend told you she was going to marry someone who had been married and divorced twice before, it is likely that your happiness for your friend would be tinged with concern. Looking at the putative husband's track record, you might consider that it was likely that he would cheat on your friend, or had other habits that might make him difficult to live with. If things started to go wrong with the relationship, you might not expect him to work hard to put them right. So, are all these people who are getting married simply foolish? No, not necessarily. Precisely because, if you take it seriously, marriage is very difficult. Getting married demonstrates to your partner that you are committed to them, that you want the relationship to endure, and that you will put in the hard work required when the relationship hits a sticky patch. But, of course, unless you actually do put in the hard work that you have promised, when it is needed, then what is probably the most solemn promise you can make will be worthless. And everyone will know that it is worthless. Another commitment that I can make is to borrow money, and so get into debt. Borrowing money involves making a promise that I will pay it back, usually plus interest. Not paying it back is therefore breaking my word. I will also have stolen from the lender the money that I have not repaid. Not repaying debt therefore marks me as a liar and a thief. Given this, it is surprising that so many people are happy to borrow money, and so be in debt. Borrowing money, unless I am certain that I can pay it back, is taking a large gamble with my reputation. And, if I am so sure that I will be able to repay the debt in future, then why not just wait until I have that money, rather than borrowing it now? Now, I might borrow from necessity. If I have no money for food, and it is a week until payday, then, unless I have assets that I can readily sell, I may have little option but to borrow some money. But, in these circumstances, I will probably have to pay extremely high rates of interest. From an economic perspective, I will therefore want to borrow as little as possible, and pay the loan back as soon as I can. And, if I am in a position where I am borrowing every month, or where I am unable to repay existing debt, or both, then there is a risk of a vicious spiral of ever-increasing debt, and ultimately bankruptcy. Although it is challenging when cash is tight, the best way to avoid this is careful budgeting, to make sure that I am spending less than I am earning. The excess can then be used to pay down existing debt, or, if I have no debt, used to build up savings, so that I can meet any unexpected costs without having to borrow. If I am confident that I will be able to meet the debt interest and capital repayments, then I might borrow because the economic arguments to do so are compelling. For example, if the mortgage repayments are within my means, and similar to what I would otherwise have to pay in rent, I might borrow so that I can buy a house. Rather than having to pay rent forever, once I have repaid the mortgage there will be nothing more to pay, and I will also own a valuable asset in the house I have purchased. However, the circumstances in which borrowing makes economic sense will be limited. Lenders do not lend out of the goodness of their hearts. They will be making a profit. Buying on credit, or through a financing scheme, or through hire purchase, will always end up costing me more than paying up front, usually significantly more. In many cases being patient, and saving up for something, will not only eliminate the risk of running up debt that I am ultimately unable to repay, but will also be cheaper. My conclusion is that I do not want to get into debt unless circumstances absolutely necessitate it, or in the rare cases where I am certain I can repay the debt, and the economic arguments for borrowing rather than saving are compelling. When I do take on debt, I want to repay it as soon as I can. I will be particularly nervous when I am not paying down my debts, and even more so if my overall level of debt is regularly increasing over time. However, this analysis is not one that society seems to endorse. We are all constantly bombarded with advertisements, from credit cards, payday lenders, mortgage providers, and retailers pushing finance schemes for purchases, all exhorting us to take on more debt. At all levels of the economy, debt has become normalized. Examples of this include the following. The UK government has a policy objective that 50% of young people should go to university. One problem with this is that many jobs that would previously have been open to school leavers, for example nursing, now require a degree. So, people are effectively being forced to go to university if they want to do these jobs. Going to university is expensive, and students are expected to finance this by taking out a student loan. Government policy is therefore strongly pushing young people to take on very significant debts, which many of them will not be able to repay. I find this concerning. Many businesses are run in such a way that they have structural debt. In other words, the business is run on the basis that it will permanently have a significant level of debt. This is often advantageous in increasing expected returns to shareholders. However, the downside is that if the business hits a bump in the road, its ability to borrow more will be constrained. This can cause an otherwise healthy business to fail. When businesses fail, very often the creditors of that business do not get paid. Shareholders' increased returns therefore come at a greater risk that the business will not meet its obligations in future. As the shareholders own the business, it is ultimately their reputation that is at risk should the business fail. In this context, it is interesting that family-owned and other owner-managed businesses are often reluctant to take on structural debts. The owners of these businesses generally have a long-term interest in the business and are directly personally associated with it. By contrast, listed businesses, where shareholders are more distant from the business, and businesses owned by private equity houses, which will typically be looking to sell the business within the next few years, are more likely to have relatively high levels of debt. Moving up a level, the entire country has a massive structural debt. Politicians seem to regard the debt market as an inexhaustible source of funds for whatever pet project they currently want to bribe the electorate with. Political debate seems to be limited to how quickly we should grow the national debt, rather than how quickly we expect to repay it. But borrowing is never a free lunch. The cost of paying interest on the national debt falls on current taxpayers. The cost of repaying tranches of that debt as they fall due will fall on future taxpayers, so it is a debt on my children. The existence of the debt limits the extent to which the country could borrow more money if needed, e.g. if there was a war or other national emergency. Ultimately, as a British subject, I care about the good name of the British people, and I do not want to see my country borrowing money which it may not be able to repay.